my podcast people. This is estate planning and asset protection attorney Leslie Marenco bringing you another episode of Having Fun with Death and Taxes. And today I am joined by my very good friend, Gil. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Leslie, first for having me here in your offices and for the invitation to join your podcast. Leslie, my friends call me Gilbert. My full name is Gilberto Matute, and I like to introduce myself that way so that people know.
Very Latin there. Right?
So people know English, Spanish. You can talk any way you want. So I do some estate planning like you do, more of the foundational stuff. As families are growing, as kids are growing up. And once they are, too far grown, I think they reach out to you and do more of the advanced planning, right?
Maybe.
So along those lines, I also do some probate and some tax controversy, which focuses specifically on dealing with the IRS when people owe money to the IRS. People, businesses, I help them deal with some of the issues that you can expect when people have to deal with the IRS.
So when I get one of those last nasty letters in the mail saying you are a liar, you didn't pay what you were supposed to pay, or you didn't file, or you didn't whatever, they should call you.
Yeah, definitely. And
instead of one of those 1-800 numbers, I hear I used to hear, I don't know.
Yeah, no, what you probably hear are those commercials saying that they save you pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Which is true. It happens, but every tax case, it's its own set of problems, its own set of finances and numbers. So there are some cases that can be resolved like that, but there's no magic formula that gets every person pennies on the dollar. So yeah, those are the type of cases that I handle on a regular basis, right? Besides the estate planning and probate, similar to your line of work.
But today we're going to Heath Ledger. That is the fantastic celebrity shit show of an estate plan that we're going to be talking about. I'll introduce a little bit just so the audience here knows what are the relevant facts. And so he passed away in 2008. He was only 28 years old. He was living in Manhattan at the time, and it was ruled an accidental overdose involving prescription medication.
Interesting.
He was not married at the time, and he had one daughter that was born in 2005, so she was around 3 years old. Little Matilda, daughter with Michelle Williams, apparently another actress that I don't know.
Never heard of Michelle
She's
Williams.
Been very busy raising her daughters. That's why we don't know who Michelle Williams is, maybe. I don't know. I have no clue. His estate was allegedly worth around $16 to $20 million when he died. But really, a lot of things happened after he died. We were talking about he won an Oscar after he passed away. And I guess it was for the Batman movie or something.
Which I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with. What is it? The Dark Knight.
Yeah,
the Dark Knight movie.
There you go. It wasn't the Joker. Who was in the Joker?
He was the Joker.
He was the Joker.
He was the Joker in the Dark Knight.
Got it. There's too many of these movies with the Joker and too many Batman movies.
They just keep making them over and over
to keep
again.
track of, actually. It was the Dark Knight. So he won that Oscar the year after he had passed away, and I'm sure that is going to increase his likeness, his commercial value, and whatnot. I don't even know. We'll have somebody on this podcast at some point that talks to me about how you get these residuary, whatever, at what point in time the contracts look like and stuff. But I don't know what those contracts look like. So I don't know if a bunch of income came in as soon as the movie, whatever, all of the licenses and whatever for the movie. So $16 million, but long-term economic, as we talk about on this podcast a lot, is worth a lot more than that. So he did have a will, which is interesting because he did it in 2003, so 5 years before he passed away. So he would have been 23 years old when he put this will together. That was before he had his daughter, and the will was actually done in Australia and prepared under Australian law, where he is from. I also didn't know he was from Australia before doing the research for this podcast.
News to me.
And the will leaves everything to his beloved parents and his beloved siblings, half and half. So I'm almost going to venture out to say that Heath comes from a little bit of money. I don't know a whole lot of very young clients that don't have already some estate planning that don't come from a lot of money.
Well, I've done it for a few the children of some clients where their children have gone away for college. I've done some basic estate planning because they want to make sure that there's a little bit of protection when the children are a little bit further away and they don't want to have things that we couldn't control. Right. Even including just doing powers of attorney and healthcare proxies, but also, having a will. I think something that people overlook sometimes is accidents. I'm veering off a little bit, but I have had lately a couple of probate cases where, a young person passed away and there's these wrongful death claims or insurance claims, and the payouts end up having to go through probate because they need, a personal representative to, dispute these claims, and who is the ultimate beneficiary with these, young individuals that maybe they're married, maybe they're not, maybe they don't have children. And so that even just the basic planning at 23, while rare, it definitely comes in handy.
So what we already see lining up to be a problem, right? We have a daughter born in 2005. We have a will that's from 2003. We have him dying in 2008. We can already identify some stuff that could have been done better. Starting with that the will is outdated.
Right.
And so the will does not talk about the daughter, certainly does not talk about baby mama here, Miss Michelle, that he did not marry. And so we do have a little bit of a timeline because he met Michelle in 2004 on Brokeback Mountain, and then they're dating, and then because they were dating in early 2005, and then in October 2005 we have Matilda. So immediately we're very fertile.
Yeah.
We're very fertile.
Okay.
And then they separate. They never got married, and they separated in 2007, and then he passes away in January of 2008, which is all very a lot of things were happening back to back. So child is not in the will, and he never thought to update his will. So how often do you see that somebody does a will? So it was 5 years between when he did the will and when he passed away. And he did pass away a little unexpectedly there. But he did have a major life event, and he did not think to update his will. How often do you see that people are not calling you when they should have called you? Or how does that usually play out? Somebody calls you and says, oh, I want to make a change. And you start asking questions and you realize they need 100 changes.
Yeah, no, I think it's all case by case basis, right? And when it comes to updating documents, a will, a trust, or any of the other, accompanying documents, we're always looking at life events that definitely warrant updates. And the birth of a child has to be, one of the major ones.
One of the biggest
right?
ones, no?
Especially if at no
it's
point.
It's the first child.
Right. At no point did he have planned for a child. You can't plan for a child that's not born yet in the will, right? But we go back to law school and the rule against perpetuities and all these things that we learned that are no longer useful. But he didn't anticipate a daughter.
Really not.
Anticipated
really not useful.
A daughter when when he drafted his will in the first place. So definitely the birth of the first child more than anything, right? You can account for future children once you've had something in place, but this being his first child, right? It becomes an issue because he designated somebody else to be the beneficiary of his estate, not his first child.
Parents, siblings. And when he did the will, so he would have been 23 when he initially did the will. He was in Australia. So let's assume, I'm not sure how much money he made in Australia, but certainly he moved to the US. I mean, he was in several movies. I guess Brokeback Mountain being one of the most first famous one,
Sure.
maybe. I'm not sure. And so he started to make money and did not update the will. So it wasn't the assets. All of a sudden, this is like Dave Chappelle. I'm rich, bitch. No, he did not update the will at that point. He did not update the will when Matilda was born. So this was just totally out of mind.
Yeah.
Totally out of mind for Heath.
So absolutely, going back to, the life events that trigger, somebody to maybe not even just make changes, but create something in the first place, right?
Yeah.
The birth of a child, death in the family, divorces, growth in business, all these things can have huge impacts on, what that
moving from one country to another.
That too, because then you're looking at state tax implications. I mean, what was it, 2005, 2008 that he passed away?
Yeah.
What was the estate tax exemption?
A lot less than it is now.
Right. So it was a
lot less than it is now.
$4 or $5 million. So everything,
and it might have been up to 55% tax back in 2008. It was 2010 that we had that year that there was no tax. No tax.
Yeah,
so,
I remember.
Kill abuelito now.
I have a little spreadsheet that has the year by year how it was increasing, and I have that year specifically. It'll start nothing, and so whoever was able to receive inheritance, receive the inheritance that year, save themselves a lot of state tax.
Yes, you would. Okay. But certainly, changing countries is a major reason. Or changing states, for God, Dios mío. Changing just from one state to another is a major reason to update your estate plan. And maybe that's essentially the problem. If his attorney that he had a relationship with, that was his estate planning lawyer, parents' estate planning, whatever it is, in Australia. And he's not gone back because he's busy working and he has all, like, it looks like career was doing very well very quickly. There was nobody there to like call him up and be like, hey, you haven't come to talk to me in a while. What's going on? I see you in a movie.
So I mean, if he's a famous actor and doing well, you assume he's got some sort of a team that's behind him, giving him some.
If we have learned one thing
some
on
basic
this podcast,
advice.
One thing on this podcast is none of these people, like, they need better financial advisors, better attorneys, I don't know. It's crazy to me. Like we just did Aretha Franklin, right? So the thought that somebody like Aretha Franklin would have like the will under the couch and the will in the china cabinet and the will like handwritten, like bullshit in a notebook. Who, like, what? Like, no, that can't be what it is.
No, I think what the lesson more than anything is, no matter, what type of star you are, rich or poor, you're going to make some decisions that are not necessarily the best in terms of anticipating things that will happen somewhere down the future or that are in the best interest of your family, because you're not thinking about it. You're living your day-to-day life, whether acting or just going to work to your 9 to 5.
Right.
You're not anticipating so many things. And that's where the planning comes into place, right? We do some sort of work, put something into place that you can maybe forget it, look back at it every few years, but be able to have something that anticipates, the unexpected.
Yeah. And it's not like we attorneys can find Aretha Franklin's number and start like sending her emails, like, Miss Franklin, have you put together your estate plan? Like, we attorneys cannot do that. So we're always relying on other professionals and other advisors to the client that's gonna, make it more top of mind or create some urgency around that, because the bar rules ethically do not allow us to start cold calling, celebrities, whatever. Like, I would say, like, the whole football team, the whole Miami Dolphins football team would be getting phone calls from estate planning attorneys. Have you done your planning?
We definitely rely on the professionals, on the teams and the connections that are behind these individuals, or like we said, the regular 9 to 5 worker that, can tell them something happens. You should probably contact this person. We're not out there like ambulance chasing,
which is also not allowed under the Florida bar rules, for the record.
Maybe at this point we'll start doing CLE for professionalism.
If you listen to our podcast, you get 1 credit of CLE. No ambulance chasing, no cold calling. I feel like I would be a very good cold caller, but I've never tested it out. No. We have Matilda. She is not accounted for in the will when he passes away 3 years later. So she's a little baby. Oh no, I guess 3-year-olds are not little babies. They're
toddlers.
They're toddlers. They're toddlers.
They're walking around a little bit.
They're walking around. They're terrible toddlers is what they are. So here in Florida, and I'm assuming in New York or LA, the same thing. We have a statute that I'm going to read to you about what is a pretermitted child. And you can tell people generally what does that mean, pretermitted child? Well, I find the statute to read out now.
Well, to keep it in layman's terms, right? Like Florida, what it's ultimately doing with the statute is protecting a child that is not accounted for in a will, right? Mm-hmm. If this child was not alive when the will was prepared, this child is still going to benefit from their parents' hard work, whatever that hard work.
With the assumption created. That that's what they would have wanted,
right? Obviously, everything comes with exceptions. If they were maybe intentionally omitted, which more questions come, you're not going to omit a minor child. You can, right? But going back to the pretermitted child, what it is, the state of Florida wants to make sure you protect minor children. And this child that was left out of the will is protected for, by Florida statute.
Yep. Right. So I'll read you Florida statute in 732. When a testator, the person doing the will, guys, omits to provide by will for any of his or her children born or adopted after making the will, the child shall receive a share of the estate equal to that if they would have died intestate. Right. And then, like you mentioned, there's a couple exceptions, which is if the omission can be proven to be intentional. So if it appears to be intentional from the will, and that can be proven by external factors. So it's not like the only thing inside of the will is like, I hate this kid. Well, that would be a specific to kids, and they would not be pretermitted because you'd actually be in the will. So it's going to be proven by external factors. And exception number 2 is if they're leaving substantially all of the estate to the parent of that child, and the parent survives. So if he would have left all of the money to Michelle with the assumption that, hey, you're going to take care of your kid, our kid, or whatever, that would also be an exception, and they wouldn't fall under the pretermitted child statute. So that is interesting here because, of course, we have no evidence whatsoever that he wanted to disinherit this child or not leave anything to his child or continue having his parents or siblings as his beneficiaries. But furthermore, there's life insurance.
Okay.
And we'll talk about the life insurance, but the child's the beneficiary of the life insurance. So he wanted to leave something for the child.
Okay.
Like he got life insurance for
his own actions. He admitted that, he was not omitting this child, right?
Maybe. Although I foresee, we do a lot of litigation here, right? So the shit shows over here. The shit shows over here. I could foresee a client calling us one day going, no, you're not understanding. The fact that he left that, their beneficiary of that account, and it will never be a $10 million life insurance policy in the situation I'm thinking like the beneficiary designation under some bank account that's relatively smaller than the rest of the estate that's going through the will of the trust. And we would use that as, let's say, maybe some external evidence that that is all they wanted to leave them. Everything else flowing through this document is exactly the way they wanted. That's why they didn't change it, right? So, of course, in litigation, we are very creative. All attorneys will be very creative. Our clients are more creative than we are, I've learned.
Yeah, I'm sure you get estate planning clients that they ask you, I want to make sure that, this is airtight and nobody can dispute it. And, oftentimes I got to tell a client, anybody can sue anybody.
Anybody can sue anybody. You have the money for the filing fees or the process server, anybody can sue anybody in this town. Absolutely.
And the reason you end up doing work with the estate planning client like yourself is so that you close as many opportunities for those lawsuits to have any sort of legs to stand on, right? The valid execution, the language in the document itself, keeping up with Florida Statute. That's why you're ultimately going to an estate planning attorney to do it the right way and not just writing it on a napkin and opening up the door to.
Have you seen any really messy omitted child cases? Have you had to probate? Hey, I was left out of this will unintentionally. My dad loves me. He said I was getting half of everything, and now I'm somehow not in there. This must be a mistake.
No, well, I haven't. Not many. One recently that I was exposed to, and I was in the dealing with the family specifically was a decedent with left a lot of money. And these, younger children that either children or relatives that thought that they were expecting to receive something, and just by the mere threat of litigation we're talking about earlier, were able to get a dollar amount, a substantial dollar amount, right?
Oh, very good. Okay.
So, and that's as much as I've seen. I'm starting to deal with a probate where an ex-spouse was actually left as the beneficiary, which kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. Life events that lead to needing certain changes, and this individual was mindful enough to either have advice or want to make sure that his ex-spouse received something. Went ahead after the divorce and said, my ex-wife is getting X amount.
Really?
And so that's
true love, people. We have Matilda. She has been left out of the will, we think unintentionally. And now we have this life insurance policy for 10 million bones. I mean, it's something. Yep. It's something. And apparently the clown that sold him this policy was one of these idiots that sell you life insurance in the mall. I heard if you walk through,
really?
I haven't walked through a mall in probably 10
me
years. But I heard there's people in malls, in little kiosks, $20, for term policies and whatever.
Really?
And I'm like, this is the most Miami shit I've ever heard. But yes, so somebody sold this guy a massive insurance policy and allowed him to put a minor child as the direct beneficiary.
Which neither of us would advise the client to do so.
God. So just the fact that the life insurance advisor, if we can call them that, did not tell him man, you're going to have so many guardianship issues. A minor child cannot inherit directly. You really should talk to an attorney. You're really going to need some more planning than just like this beneficiary designation. I mean, was the next question then asked, like, this money's going to go to Michelle or to the kid? And who's like, does Michelle get to do whatever she wants with it? Like, did any of this conversation happen? It doesn't.
Yeah, no, probably not, right? Because he needed something, even something basic, right? What we think as basic, right? To maybe create a trust and make the trust a beneficiary, and then problem solved.
Problem solved.
No issues with having to go to court to get a guardianship appointed, to have to do yearly accounting.
Accounting. Fantastic.
Are you doing any guardianship?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we do.
so you're
mostly litigated.
Yeah. So that yearly accounting,
asking. Imagine now Michelle has to go ask a court for money to do all these different things for Matilda. Not fun.
And so
not fun.
Besides just the headache of that, then paying attorney's fees, paying accounting.
Yeah, and I'm sure Michelle, who is an actress and probably not wanting for money, is not super concerned. But imagine the situation where like your spouse has passed away or whatever it is, your ex-spouse has passed, baby daddy has passed away. And now there's money, but you have no access to it. And so whatever child support this person was giving you before is not coming in anymore, unless there were specific things in the MSA and maybe additional life insurance for you to cover that. Again, now you're thinking of more high net worth type people. And sometimes that's really, really detrimental. Like people freak out. Like I'm no longer getting my child support and you're telling me I don't have access to that money. Well, we can go ask for some of that money to pay for the kids, whatever it is that we want to ask the judge for. But this isn't like willy-nilly, you just get to go use the money or pay your own mortgage or do whatever it is that you're doing, right? We need to prove these things. We need to ask the judge and give them actual reasons as to why we need this money.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like why we do some sort of planning that avoids probate in the first place, right? Because not that probate is the end of the world, right? It's just a process, right, that we go through. It's a process. But it's a process where now you're having to ask for permission to do everything that you need to do for your family, in this case for little Matilda.
Yes.
Right. And so that goes back to what you're saying.
So we're going to need a probate. We're going to need a guardianship. And maybe Michelle does need this money. Maybe she doesn't care about this money. But let's fast forward to when Matilda's 18.
Yeah. When
all of a sudden this guardianship is over and a check is going to be written. So let's say Michelle never needs this money. We got $10 million. Let's say it's never invested in anything. $10 million, which, well, I mean, with the way inflation is going, maybe not so great. But okay, in the normal scheme of things, $10 million is still $10 million. Yeah. And we're just gonna hand little Matilda $10 million when she's 18. Little Matilda, we hope you've done well. We hope you're a responsible young woman. You need to do some estate planning, okay? That's all we know. Somebody get this to Matilda, all right? This is not solicitation. This is advertising. And so we did guardianships, any guardianship documents set up. There were no trusts. There was not even an updated will. So this would have gone through probably, I'm assuming, the probate and guardianship court of LA. And the nice thing about this, as we learned while we were doing this research, is the whole family who were the beneficiaries of this will said, obviously, our son has passed away. We have a grandchild. Yeah. We have a niece and a nephew and whatever. And so we understand, and we would actually want her to have everything that her dad would have left her, which is, does not happen often, guys. There's a reason why, like, every other case is litigated here. We don't see that kind of like wonderful.
Yeah, the fact that the will was never updated left wide open the door for, mom and dad and siblings to say, the will says it's us, and sorry, little Matilda.
You're getting $10 million of a life insurance policy. So clearly that's what you're getting, little Matilda, and we're getting the rest. Thanks, bye. Nobody, everything here was very, very, and this isn't even like the other one that's been in the news for sure, that was Kobe, that the youngest daughter had been left out of whatever was the last version of the will and the trust. But that was obviously, Vanessa petitioned the court to add the last child. And that just meant that the other kid going to have a little bit less of a share because we're adding one more kid. Here is actually a very special case because this totally changes distribution all
Sure.
around, right? Like there was no way around the clown of an advisor that sold you this life insurance policy allowed you to put your daughter's name directly. Like that blows my mind. Like I understand you didn't go to see another estate planning attorney or you call your guy in Australia to get a referral in LA or whatever it is. But like whoever sold you this policy,
I got to use it.
there is the flip side to that of like if your client is going to promise to go and, talk to their estate planning lawyer and get a trust in place and change the beneficiary to the trust. And yes, Heath, yes. And he said yes. And that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
probably not. More often
He's like, probably not. No.
Probably more often than not, like we have to hold our clients' hands to like walk them to what they need to
do anything.
Right? Because even just getting started on something foundational, it's not burdensome, but a lot of people don't see it as a priority oftentimes.
Right. Especially like we were just talking about this with the Joe Robbie episode. When you're a business owner and you have a million other things going on, and we know that better than anyone, right? Like there's just a million things going on in the business or whatever. Like it's true, everything goes by the wayside, right? Like, dentist appointments get postponed, doctor's appointments get postponed, like,
absolutely.
Week after week. It's like, call them next week, I need next week. Like all of my doctors and my dentists, like, hate me. They already know, like, my assistant's voice.
God.
So I understand to an extent that, when you are a business owner or a very whatever famous actor that is very busy, there's a lot of other things that take priority.
Yeah, life happens, right? And ultimately, you're planning for unexpected things to happen, but you're also planning so that you don't have to be constantly worried about those things, right?
And man, he was 28. Like, it is kind of crazy to think, like, this is a 28-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, that even had a will at all.
It could be that somebody whispered into his ear, now you're making money. Just put something in writing.
At least get her a life insurance policy.
Right. Well, yeah.
Do something.
Not that part.
Something.
That advice was not good advice.
That advice was not good. Well, that was incomplete advice, I guess. They didn't tell him the next part.
Yeah.
But so he did something, and he was only 28. So I guess compared to some of these other celebrity estates, he's done better. So what would you have done? Heath walks into your office. I heard you on this podcast. You're famous now. Worldwide. We're listening to worldwide. And so what should I do, Gil?
Like
what should I do?
I said,
what is the laundry list of things you're going to put in place for Heath?
To avoid that guardianship part, right? We need to get a guardian in place through the will. And to avoid the guardianship again with regards to managing the money, you need a trust that has a trustee designated, maybe an alternate trustee in there in case the first one is in there.
Yes.
And you want instructions in that trust how you want little Matilda to get the benefit of that money. Definitely not. I say definitely. There's always exceptions. There's always clients that do say, I think my child is going to be very mature at 18 or I want them to get everything at 21. Those are, again, exceptions.
Yeah.
But typically in a trust, you're using some sort of staggered distributions, right? For
at a minimum, you're
right?
like, hey, let's make sure that if they blew all the first tranche of money they have.
Yeah. And so you create this, what we call like foundational work, right? So that we can avoid having to go through court. And again, the guardian of Matilda doesn't have to be the same person as the trustee. I tell clients, you can trust, mom to take care of little Matilda, and you can trust your brother to be the one that manages the finances. All these conversations do take place.
Yeah.
Well, again, with the ultimate goal in mind of keeping things in the family, keeping court out of it, keeping probate, keeping away the idea of having to ask for permission to do, with your money, what needs to be done to take care of, in this case, little Matilda, Heath Ledger's daughter. And so definitely all of those conversations are things that you would be having with the client that walks in the door and says, I'm worth $20 million. I'm worth 30, regardless of how much you're worth, right?
Regardless.
Even $100,000, there is a lot of foundational work that can be put in place that keeps a lot of these problems away without, again, needing to ask for permission from a judge, or having to have a random guardian appointed or open the door for disputes. And definitely, again, it doesn't matter how much money this person is worth. Like, we're talking about a guy that was worth $20-30 million. This foundational work would have cost him a few $1,000s, right? And these expenses that that the family's having to do with, right? Maybe they do have the funds to deal with it, but the headache that comes.
That's also what we say to some people, right? Like, they think of themselves as not rich, and you're like, yeah, the money that you do have is even more important for you because it's a smaller amount of money. It's actually like much more important. Maybe Michelle did not need any of these assets to take care of her daughter whatsoever, but you, Joe Schmo here in Miami, that has whatever, a house and a couple bank accounts and whatever it is, like, this is what you've worked for your whole life. You should want to protect it and pass it down if you're not going to spend it yourself. Even more so than if you were wealthy.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day as well, families or parents, right? They have, and they may not say it, but they have a legacy that they want to, leave behind. And, the way that you structure and you do this type of planning goes a long way into how that legacy continues on, whether for the benefit of little Matilda or for the benefit of, Joe Schmo's children, right? And so that planning that, we're putting together is the foundation, and it goes a long way to protecting that legacy.
Yeah, a legacy that is not of a disaster. Like, my parents left a mess and a guardianship and a probate and a whatever and all sorts of, for sure. Well, I think we've talked a lot today. We've taught a few side stories there. Yeah. My ADD got the better of me today for sure. Thank you so much, Gil,
thank you for
joining
having me.
And we will see you next time on Having Fun with Death and Taxes.